In this video, we'll learn 5 new conjunctions, 6 new prepositions, and then a couple of new pronouns. By the end of the video, you should plan to be able to write down a list of all of your conjunctions from memory, listed by position in the amusement park, and a list of all your prepositions from memory, listing them according to which ride they're in. Let's start with the conjunctions cual, aunque, mientras, pues, and which are the last conjunctions we need for Spanish fluency. Even though Joel loves the amusement park's rides, sometimes he can't even make his mind up. Today is one of those days. Joel is so indecisive about what ride he wants to go on that he wastes tons of time and money at the binoculars feature in the park. In fact, he pays the binoculars so many times that he ends up with no money left in his pockets. The pandas are getting impatient, and they tell him that they want to go and ride something. Joel now feels nervous because he doesn't want to admit that he's wasted all the money, so he says hesitantly, "Well, if we're out of money, then we can't ride anything." But he's thinking of the word waste, and so he ends up saying, "Well, if we're out of money, pues, we can't ride anything." Joel points at a wastebasket which is hanging on the side of the binoculars to strengthen his point. Now, the word pues is used in logical statements like this, particularly after if or si. It means something roughly equivalent to then or since. Now let's take a look at the things that are hanging between the rides. We have the shoes that represent y, which is and, the tire representing o, which is or, and the knee pads representing ni, which means neither or nor. Sometimes Joel changes these words based on what comes after them. The word e changes to if it's followed by an e sound in the thing that comes after it, and the word o changes to u if it's followed by an o sound. This is because Joel wants to be clear instead of repeating the same vowel sound twice. So let's look at some examples to show how this works. For example, if he wanted to say Sofia and Isabella, it would be Sofia y Isabella if he used e. But he doesn't do that. Since the next sound is e for Isabella, it's actually Sofia e Isabella. To say someday or another, that would be algún día o otro, but that would be kind of strange to hear. It would be algún día o otro, so he actually uses the u instead, algún día u otro. As you can see, the e in the first case turned into and the o turned into u. This is pretty easy to remember since it's always a very closely related vowel sound. Now here's a real-life example where o turns into u. Or another day we can go. U otro día podemos ir.
U otro día podemos ir.
Now let's look back down at the paths. Something has changed since the last time we were here. Some walls have been built around some of the paths, separating them more distinctly. These walls represent the word cual, which means which. This word can be used in place of que in certain situations. Now, the word cual is a strange conjunction. Unlike the word que, which you use by itself, the word cual always gets an article before it. So instead of phrase, que, phrase, we get something like phrase, el cual, phrase. It might help to remember that the wall is sort of like a sheep pasture fence, which is where our articles are stored. El, la, los, las, etc. These always go before cual in a sentence. So here are some examples. There are many books which are all good. So you'll hear, there are many books, los cuales are all very good.
Hay muchos libros, los cuales son todos muy buenos.
Now let's just try some variations on that sentence for variety. It was my sister, which is very nice. Era mi hermana, la cual es muy buena. There's a man, which is my friend. Hay un hombre, el cual es mi amigo. He was here yesterday, which was very strange. Estaba aquí ayer, lo cual era muy extraño. In that last case, you might be confused by the lo cual, but that just indicates a general which. Instead of a specific masculine or feminine noun, we're saying that the entire fact of him being here yesterday is what is strange. He was here yesterday, lo cual was very strange. In general, lo cual is actually a pretty common way to say which in Spanish. Now, the line for the water slide is very long and moves slowly, since only one person can ride the water slide at a time. As a consequence, many of the people who are in line have fallen asleep. Since Joel is out of money, he decides to steal the yen that's sticking out of their pockets. He tells the pandas, "I'm stealing yen from them while they're asleep waiting in line." Now, his word for while when he says this is mientras, with the stressed syllable yen, mientras. It's interesting to note that the word mientras is stored right next to cuando, the wand on this path. Now, suddenly, an earthquake shakes the amusement park. A giant crack in the ground opens up next to Joel's magic wand and his newly stolen yen. At first, Joel is afraid for his possessions, but then he sees that they're fine. So he says to himself, I still have a magic wand and a bunch of money, even though there was an earthquake. The word aunque, which sounds a little bit like earthquake, means even though. So Joel would say, I still have a magic wand and a bunch of money, aunque there was an earthquake. All three of the conjunctions at this area on the path, aunque, mientras, and cuando, tend to be followed by a subjunctive. So for example, to say although it be true, Joel wouldn't say aunque es verdad. He would be more likely to say aunque sea verdad.
Aunque sea verdad.
Now we could go ahead and change that sentence by exchanging aunque with a different conjunction from the same place. So we could use cuando sea verdad or mientras sea verdad, which would mean while it be true. Now let's think about something for a second. We're done learning conjunctions now. That's all the conjunctions we're going to learn. So we have no more stories or mnemonics on the lines between the rides or the paths that connect the rides, because we're done with that. So if you have all of these words down, you're done learning conjunctions. So breathe deeply and let that sink in for a second. We're not about to leave the park, though. We have a few more prepositions to learn. So let's go to the rides themselves and learn our last prepositions: contra, entre, hace, durante, and hacia. First, Joel glances at the carousel and is shocked. The con man is on the carousel. But instead of riding on a horse like normal people do, the con man is walking around bumping into all the horses. "What are you doing there?" asks Joel. "I'm walking against the horses," says the con man. "Every time the ride starts, oof, I walk in a contrary direction. That way, ouch, I'm not actually moving at all, oof. And so I get to be on the ride without having to pay for it since I'm, ouch, technically not riding it." Joel begins to see how clever this is. The con man is on an amusement ride without paying. And what he's doing is moving against the flow of the horses, defying the conventional way of riding a carousel. The word for against is contra. "How can I join you without paying?" asks Joel. "Oh, join me," says the con man. "It's not hard to get on, ouch. Just enter between the horses after the ride starts." So Joel tries to enter the ride by going between the horses, but it's difficult because the horses are moving. But he sees that a snake is succeeding in getting on by slithering between and among the horses. The word for between is entre, kind of like enter. Meanwhile, a backhoe is slowly digging underneath the carousel. The word for underneath is bajo. Before we learn our next word, let's review what Joel did in Lesson 7 when he crawled from the carousel to the Ferris wheel. So he crawled desde the carousel hasta the Ferris wheel. This time, Joel does the same crawl again, but this time he gets lost in the weeds because nobody mowed the park. By the time he finds the Ferris wheel several days later, he arrives on the wrong side. The Ferris wheel operator looks at Joel and sees the trail of trampled weeds that he left behind him. "Did you make that trail?" he asks. "Yes," says Joel. "I've been crawling ever since I left the carousel on Saturday." "How long ago was that?" asks the carousel manager. "A whole week ago," says Joel. Hace a whole week. The word hace here could be translated as it makes, as in it makes a week. But Joel also uses the word hace to mean ago, and it's used before nouns. So a day ago would be hace un día, and 3 years ago would be hace 3 años. So as you can see, it sounds like it makes 3 years, but hace is being used as a special kind of preposition. We have 2 last prepositions to learn. Joel continues crawling through the weeds, this time in the direction of the water slide because he's extremely thirsty from all this work. Joel can't look up because he's so tired, but he knows what direction to go in because he hears music playing. It's a recording of Jimmy Durante singing "Make Someone Happy." The music stops when nobody's riding the water slide, but the music always plays during the ride. And the word for during is durante, represented by a gramophone record that's floating down the slide. Joel almost reaches the water slide before he completely runs out of energy, dehydrated and unable to continue. At this point, he finally cries for help. "Where are the pandas when you need them? Won't they help me get to the water slide?" The pandas hear Joel and call back, "Where are you?" "I'm in the weeds crawling toward the water slide." "Did you get to the water slide?" "No, I didn't get to it, but I've been going towards it," he yells back with the last of his strength. Previously, we learned the word a to mean to. This is the word that Joel would use if he was able to reach the water slide. But the word hacia, with the stress on that first syllable, a, means toward. So Joel thinks of hacia as a more dehydrated, frustrated word. He's going toward the water slide, but he doesn't get to the water slide. Now let's practice some of our new prepositions. So first of all, a month ago, I spoke with Ignacio. Now remember that instead of a month ago, in Spanish it's phrased as ago a month. So it's hace a month, I spoke con Ignacio.
Hace un mes hablé con Ignacio.
Now, between them there was nothing. Entre ellas no había nada.
Entre ellas no había nada.
We could change that last sentence to contra, so instead of between them, it could be against them. So how about against us there was nothing? Contra nosotros no había nada. Or how about during that time there was nothing? Durante ese tiempo no había nada. Now I recommend pausing and seeing if you can write down a list of all of your conjunctions and prepositions from memory, listing them by position in the amusement park. For the prepositions, I recommend putting an appropriate noun after each one. For example, at the carousel ride, you could use the noun these houses or estas casas. For example, de estas casas, bajo estas casas, en estas casas, entre estas casas, contra estas casas, and sobre estas casas. If you paused the video to do that, you should have come up with this list of prepositions and this list of conjunctions. If these are all in your memory, you're ready to move on to one new pronoun in the countryside. So Joel rushes through the countryside on his way home, but he stops at the swamp walls because of something strange. In the swampy water surrounding the dead hand that represents quien, and the robe, which represents que, there's a wall. Joel wonders if he can walk across the swamp just using this wall as a pathway, but he isn't sure which path to follow because it spreads out and separates. So the word cual, with an accent mark, means which. So this is the same word that we learned in the amusement park with the walls that were there, but when it has an accent mark like this, it's used as a question. In the swamp, we're learning cual to mean which as a question, just like we learned quien as a question to mean who. Now, with both of these words, we can actually make them plural by adding es to the end. So instead of who is he, which would be quién es él, we could say who are they, which would mean quiénes son ellos.
¿Quiénes son ellos?
We can do that with cual as well, turning cual into cuáles for a plural. Now, it's interesting to note that very often, for some reason, Joel likes to ask which instead of what. This means that the word cual, or cuáles, is much more common than which is in English. So when in doubt, Joel shows favoritism toward cual instead of que. For example, instead of saying what problems, Joel might prefer to say which problems.
¿Cuáles problemas?
Next, we'll move on to the plaza to learn the rest of our adverbs.